I need you to wait, not for long, just a little longer than you have been waiting, and I know you have been waiting. I know how long the waiting has been and what it has cost you, and how many mornings you have started with the reaching and how many evenings you have ended with the questions about why what was promised has not arrived at the fullness you were reaching toward. I know all of that, and I am asking you to wait a little longer, not because the promise is not real, not because what is coming has been delayed beyond its appointed time, because the moment of the arriving is very close now. And the person who waits just a little longer is the person who is present when what was promised finally crosses from the promise into the experience. Because what is coming is worth it. What is waiting for you, specifically for you, in the specific arrangement that has been building toward the specific moment that is approaching in your specific story, is worth the wait. Not a small thing. Not the ordinary version of the provision that the ordinary prayer reaches toward. Something specific and significant and designed for the specific face that is receiving this message right now. I said your face. I want to explain what I mean by that, because this message is not a generic message. It is a specific message addressed to a specific person, and the word face is the most precise way to describe what I am addressing it to. Not your personality, not your circumstances. Your face, the specific, irreducible, unrepeatable expression of what you are, the way you move through the world, the quality of presence you bring to the rooms you enter, the specific texture of the inner life that shows up, sometimes fully and sometimes partially and sometimes not at all, in the surface that the world sees when it looks at you. Your face is the expression of your design. It is the surface through which everything you were built to give to the world, the creativity, the love, the wisdom, the leadership, the specific contribution that only you can make, arrives into reality. And the surprise I am going to describe in this conversation is about your face, about the gap between the face that is and the face that was designed, about the specific condition that has been creating that gap without your knowledge or your consent, and about the specific provision that closes it. I want to be direct with you about something before we go any further. This message was placed in your path today, not tomorrow, not last week, today, in the specific season of your specific life. And the placement was not accidental. You have been in a waiting season. The waiting season has its own quality, its own particular kind of difficulty, its own specific texture of carrying something forward in the absence of the full confirmation that what you are carrying is going to arrive. The waiting season is the season of the person who has been given a sense of what is coming without yet being given the full experience of its arrival. I am not here to extend the waiting season. I am here to announce what is at the end of it, and what is at the end of the waiting season is not an abstract spiritual arrival. It is a specific practical provision that addresses a specific identifiable cause of the gap between the face that has been showing up and the face that was designed. The provision is scientific in its mechanism and spiritual in its significance, and it is available today, not eventually, today. I want to describe the waiting season with more specificity than the general language of patience and hope usually carries, because I think the specific texture of the waiting season is something that you know from the inside and that deserves to be named from the outside, from the position of the one who can see both the interior of the waiting and the arrival that the waiting is moving toward. The waiting season has a specific daily quality. It is the quality of mornings that begin with a sustained hope that has not yet been matched by a sustained arrival, of days that contain the ordinary demands of ordinary life alongside the extraordinary awareness that what has been promised is not yet fully present, of evenings that end with the specific kind of tiredness that is not only the physical tiredness of a day but the deeper tiredness of a person who has been carrying a sustained reaching that has not yet been met with the full receiving. And the specific thing about the waiting season that I want to name is this: the person in the waiting season does not only carry the hope of what is coming, they carry a secondary burden that the waiting itself produces. The burden of wondering whether the waiting is the result of something they have done or failed to do, whether the gap between the promise and the arrival reflects something about their worthiness to receive what was promised, whether the length of the waiting is a message about their adequacy or their readiness or the legitimacy of what they have been reaching toward. I want to say something specific and clear about that secondary burden. It is not accurate. The length of the waiting season is not a message about your adequacy. It is not a measure of your worthiness. It is not a reflection on the legitimacy of what you have been reaching toward. The waiting season is the season of formation, and the specific formation that is completing in you is the formation that the arrival requires. The person who is arriving at the provision today is a person who has been made ready by exactly the waiting season that is felt from the inside like the opposite of readiness. I want to tell you something about what the waiting season produces in the specific person who carries it with the specific quality of attention and sincerity and sustained hope that you have been carrying it with. The waiting season is not wasted time. In the economy of how a person is prepared for what is coming, the waiting season is the season of depth, of formation, of the kind of interior work that the arrival without formation would have rushed past. The person who arrives at the provision without the waiting season is a different person than the person who arrives at it having waited well, and you have been waiting well. You have been carrying what was entrusted to you with a quality of faithfulness that the surface of your daily life may not always have reflected, but that the interior of your daily life has been maintaining in the places that count most. The waiting season is ending. The announcement I am making in this conversation is the announcement that what was promised is arriving, not in the indefinite future, in the specific present of today, in the specific form of a provision that was built for the specific gap I am going to describe in detail as this conversation continues. And the face that receives what this provision produces is the face that was always meant to show up in your life, the face that the design was always pointing toward, the face that the waiting season was always preparing to reveal. Stay, please, because what comes next in this conversation is the specific description of what has been affecting your face, what the gap is and why it formed and what addresses it, and then the specific announcement of the surprise that has been waiting for you. The surprise is real. The provision is specific. The day is today, and the face that is at stake is yours. Please listen. I want to describe your face to you, not the face in the mirror. The face I am talking about is older than the face in the mirror and more fundamental. It is the face that was given to you in the design of who you are. The face that, in the very earliest years of your life, before the conditions of the world began to shape what was accessible and what was not, expressed the full quality of what you were built to carry. In the earliest years, the face I am describing was present in a way that most people who knew you then could feel without being able to name. There was a quality to your inner life in those years, a quality of access and creativity and intuition and presence that showed up in the specific texture of who you were. The thinking was whole. The curiosity was unbounded. The creative access was effortless. The emotional integration was natural. The connection between what was felt inside and what was expressed outside was not mediated by the filters that adult life gradually builds. The face was present, fully, as it was designed to be. What happened between that face and the face that has been showing up in your adult life is not a mystery. It is a specific and describable and once named, addressable process. And I am going to name it in this conversation, not to produce shame about the face that has been showing up. The face that has been showing up with everything it had access to. The question is not whether the face has been trying. The question is whether what the face has had access to has been the full design or a reduced version of it. And the answer, for the vast majority of adults living in the conditions of the modern world, is that what has been accessible is a reduced version. Specifically, it is the version that is available when the brain is operating in the fragmented state that the conditions of modern life gradually produce, rather than the integrated state that the design calls for. The fragmented state produces a fragmented face. The integrated state produces the face that was always meant to show up. I want to speak to the specific cost of the fragmented face in the area of spiritual life. Because the spiritual dimension is where the gap between the designed face and the available face is most often felt most acutely, and it is also the dimension that is most often left out of the ordinary description of what the neural fragmentation produces. The prayer life of a person operating from the fragmented baseline is different from the prayer life that the integrated baseline produces, not in the sincerity. The sincerity is fully present and fully real, but in the quality of the access, the specific sense of being heard and being in genuine contact with the one being addressed in prayer that the integrated state produces is more intermittently available from the fragmented state. The person praying from the fragmented state prays sincerely and prays consistently and prays with a genuine desire for contact and for reception. And the experience of the prayer too often is the experience of sending the prayer toward the contact and feeling the contact arrive at a distance, not absent, but filtered, muffled, less fully present than the sincerity of the reaching deserved. The face that shows up in prayer from the integrated state is the face that was designed to pray. The face that carries the full capacity of both the analytical articulation of what is needed and the intuitive receptivity that hears what is given in response. The integrated state is the prayer state, and the restoration of the integrated state is, among many other things, the restoration of the quality of prayer access that the waiting season has been producing at less than full capacity. I want to speak to the financial cost of the fragmented face as well, because it is real and it is specific and it is different from the ordinary conversation about money. The financial expression of the fragmented baseline is the specific experience of having real ideas and real drive and real capacity, and consistently finding that the ideas are harder to evaluate clearly than they should be, that the drive is harder to sustain through the implementation than it should be, and that the capacity arrives in the moments of planning and preparation, but does not always arrive with the same completeness in the moments of execution and decision. The whole brain state, the integrated state that was the original design, produces the specific combination of analytical clarity and creative ideation and intuitive decision confidence that financial opportunity requires in the moments when it most needs to be acted on. The fragmented state produces those capacities intermittently rather than reliably, and the financial cost of intermittent capacity is the specific gap between the ideas that were had and the outcomes that were achieved. The opportunities seen but not fully pursued, the decisions made with less confidence than the decision deserved, the revenue that the capacity should have generated but that the access to the capacity at the specific moments that mattered was not quite complete enough to produce. I want to stay with the specific cost of the reduced face before I move to the provision that addresses it, because the costs are real and the costs are specific, and naming them is part of what this conversation is for. The face that operates from the fragmented state, from the reduced version of the neural integration that was designed to be the baseline, carries specific and describable limitations in specific and recognizable areas of the daily life. In the area of thinking, the fragmented state produces a quality of mental effort that exceeds the quality of the output it generates. The person working from the fragmented baseline can feel the gap between how hard they are thinking and how good the thinking is. The ideas that arrive feel like a fraction of the ideas that should be arriving. The analytical capacity is present but working against a resistance that should not be there. The creative access is intermittent rather than reliable. The quality of thinking that shows up in the best moments, the thinking that feels like what the mind is actually capable of, is not reliably available in the ordinary moments when the ordinary demands of the ordinary day require it. In the area of relationships, the fragmented state produces a quality of presence that falls short of the quality of care that is genuinely felt. The person who loves deeply and whose capacity for presence and empathy and connection is real and substantial finds, in the fragmented state, that what arrives in the actual relational moment is less than what was felt in the reaching toward it. The conversation that should have been fully present was partially distracted. The emotional attunement that should have been complete was partial. The quality of being with that the relationship deserved was underdelivered, not because the care was absent, but because the neural integration that would have allowed the full care to be fully expressed was operating below the level it was designed to operate at. In the area of purpose, the fragmented state produces the specific experience of knowing you were built for something more specific than you have been able to fully access or articulate or move toward. The sense of calling is present. The sense of inadequacy to the calling is also present. And the gap between them, the gap between the specific sense of what you were made for and the specific available capacity to pursue it, is one of the most persistent sources of the quiet frustration that the waiting season produces. The face that was designed to express your specific purpose has been trying to express it through a channel that the neural fragmentation has been narrowing without your knowledge or consent. Now I want to tell you the name of what I have been describing, the gap between the designed face and the available face. The gap between the integrated state that was the original operating condition and the fragmented state that the conditions of modern life have gradually produced. The gap has a name in the neuroscience. And knowing the name is important because the name connects the gap to the specific mechanism that addresses it, and the mechanism connects the daily experience I described to a specific and testable and resolvable condition rather than a permanent feature of who you are. The name of the gap is interhemispheric fragmentation, which is the scientific description of what happens when the active coordination between the left and right hemispheres of the brain The coordination that produces the integrated thinking and intuition and emotional regulation and creative access that characterizes the whole brain state falls below the level it was designed to operate at. When the hemispheres are coordinating at the designed level, the brain produces the specific quality of integrated function I described as the original face. When the coordination is reduced, the brain operates in the fragmented state, and the face that is available is the reduced version. I want to tell you about the research that established this understanding. In the 1960s, a neuroscientist named Roger Sperry conducted a series of studies on patients whose two brain hemispheres had been surgically disconnected. What Sperry discovered in those studies was so fundamental to the understanding of how the brain produces consciousness and thought and experience that the Nobel Committee awarded him the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1981, specifically for this work. What the research showed is that the two hemispheres of the brain are not redundant systems. They are complementary ones. The left hemisphere processes information analytically, sequentially, linguistically. The right hemisphere processes information spatially, intuitively, holistically. And when both are coordinating, when the signals and patterns and insights of both systems are actively available to the whole of the mind at the same time, the result is a quality of thinking and experiencing that neither hemisphere produces alone. This discovery had profound implications for understanding not just neurological disorders but the ordinary functioning of the ordinary mind. Because if the two hemispheres are designed to coordinate and the coordination is what produces the highest expression of mental function, then anything that reduces the coordination reduces the quality of the mental function that is available, even in a brain that has no clinical disorder and no neurological damage. The question that the research raised was this: what reduces the coordination in an ordinary, healthy, neurologically intact adult brain? And the answer that the subsequent decades of research produced is a convergence of conditions that are almost universal in modern adult life. Chronic cognitive load, the sustained demand on analytical processing that the information-dense modern world places on the left hemisphere, gradually reduces the active cross-hemisphere coordination that was present in the earlier years when the cognitive demands were lower and the balance between the two systems was more naturally maintained. Sleep fragmentation, the chronic mild interruption of the deep sleep cycles in which the brain consolidates and coordinates across the hemispheres, reduces the nightly restoration of the coordination that the daily demands have been wearing down. And the specific quality of the modern visual and informational environment, the rapid scan, short engagement pattern of screen-based attention, trains the attentional system toward the fragmented mode rather than the integrated mode. The result is the state that I described in the earlier section of this conversation as the fragmented face, not pathology. The ordinary effect of ordinary modern life on the neural system that was designed for a different kind of daily environment. The whole brain deficit is not a disorder, it is a condition, and conditions are addressable. I want to stay with the research finding for a moment longer before I move to the specific application of what Dr. Barone built, because the research finding carries a significance that goes beyond the clinical and into the territory of what the theological tradition has always said about the human mind and its designed capacity. The research shows that the integrated brain, the brain in which both hemispheres are actively coordinating, produces a qualitatively different kind of experience than the fragmented brain. Not just better performance on cognitive tasks, a different quality of being present, a different quality of perceiving the world, a different quality of what arrives in the moments of intuition and inspiration and creative insight, a different quality of what is available in the deep quiet of prayer and reflection. The integrated brain is the brain that has access to what the full design produces. And what the full design produces, in the specific terms that the research describes, is a quality of mental function that most adults have experienced only intermittently and that they remember, often with a quality of longing, as the quality of their best thinking, their most alive moments, their most fully present days. The whole brain state is not a peak state, it is the designed baseline. The research is saying that what most adults experience as their peak, the days when the thinking is sharpest and the creativity is most alive and the relationships are most fully present and the sense of purpose is most clear, is actually the ordinary expression of what the brain was designed to deliver every day. The peak is the design. The ordinary fragmented baseline is the departure from it. And the departure from the design, the ordinary daily state of the ordinary modern adult brain, has a specific cause and a specific address. The cause is the convergence of modern conditions I described earlier in this part. The address is the specific auditory signal that Dr. Barone built his 8-minute sequence to deliver. I want to give you the specific description of how the neural sync technology that Dr. Barone developed works, because the mechanism is important, not because you need to understand the neuroscience to benefit from it, but because understanding the mechanism is what transforms the experience from something that might be placebo to something that is grounded in the specific response of a specific neural architecture to a specific input. The mechanism is what makes the experience verifiable, and the verifiability is what makes the guarantee possible. A neurologist named Dr. Daniel Barone from New York spent years in the research that Sperry pioneered, specifically looking at the question of what intervention could restore the cross-hemisphere coordination in an ordinary adult brain without requiring clinical treatment or years of specialized practice. What the research pointed toward was a specific class of auditory signal that the neural system responds to with an increase in cross-hemisphere coordination. Not any auditory signal, a specific type at specific parameters, delivered in a specific sequence that the neural system responds to in the specific way that the research predicts. Dr. Barone built the specific intervention that the research pointed to, an 8-minute auditory sequence delivered through headphones that uses a technology he calls neural sync to produce the specific auditory signal that the neural system responds to with the restoration of cross-hemisphere coordination. 8 minutes a day. That is the complete input required. The neural system does the rest, not because the sequence is magic, because the sequence provides the specific input that the specific neural architecture was designed to respond to with the specific output that the research describes as restored whole brain function. This is the surprise that is waiting for you. Neural sync technology is Dr. Barone's name for the specific method of combining auditory signals that his research showed produces the cross-hemisphere activation that the brain was designed to sustain. The method involves delivering specific tones to the left and right ears simultaneously at frequencies that differ by a precise interval. When the brain processes the slight difference between what the left ear hears and what the right ear hears, the processing itself requires and produces the cross-hemisphere coordination that the research identifies as the signature of whole brain function. The brain does not need to be instructed to coordinate. The coordination is the neural response to the specific auditory input. It is not a meditation technique. It is not a visualization method. It is a direct auditory input to a neural system that responds to it with a specific, predictable, and measurable increase in cross-hemisphere coordination. The sequence that Dr. Barone built delivers this specific input over 8 minutes. 8 minutes in the morning, ideally, with headphones in a quiet space where the auditory signal can reach the neural system without competition from the ambient noise of the environment, eyes closed. No other task required. 8 minutes. And then the rest of the day begins from whatever baseline the neural system is in following the sequence. What the sequence produces, in the specific terms of the daily experience, is this. The baseline from which the day begins is different after the sequence than it was before it. Not dramatically different in the first use, subtly different. The quality of the first few hours of thinking and perceiving and relating has a slightly different texture, a slightly greater access to what the design was always calling for, a slightly reduced friction in the transitions between the analytical and the intuitive, between the task-focused and the relational, between the concentrated and the receptive. The face that the day begins with after the sequence is a slightly fuller version of the designed face than the face that the day begins with without it. In the first week, the difference is subtle enough that some people describe it as barely perceptible but consistently present. In the second and third week, as the practice accumulates and the cross-hemisphere coordination is being reinforced rather than introduced, the difference becomes more named. By the end of the first month, most people describe the shift as unmistakable. The daily starting point is different. The floor has risen, and the face that rises from that floor each morning is the face that the waiting season was always preparing to reveal. I want to say the name of what Dr. Barone built, the sequence, the technology, the complete package of the practice and its supporting materials is called the Genius Switch. That is the name of the surprise that has been waiting for you, not a metaphor, not a spiritual experience with no practical mechanism. A specific, clinically grounded, neuroscience-backed, 8-minute daily practice called the Genius Switch, built by a neurologist from New York, confirmed by over 18,000 people who have used it in their actual daily lives and reported the specific shift in the quality of their daily experience that the research predicts. The Genius Switch is the provision that the waiting season was holding until the moment when the person it was designed for was in the specific place to receive it. And that person is you, in this specific moment, on this specific day, through a link that is in the description of this video, at a price I am going to describe in detail as this conversation continues, with a guarantee that removes the financial risk from the decision to find out whether what I have described becomes your specific experience. I want to give you more of the texture of what neural sync technology produces in the specific daily experience before I continue with Lisa and the other testimonies. Because the mechanism is one thing. The daily lived experience of the mechanism in the conditions of a real adult life is the thing that tells you whether what I am describing is worth the 8 minutes and the $39 and the willingness to test what has been described. The specific quality that most people describe first in the earliest days of the practice is not a dramatic mental shift. It is a quality of morning that is different from the quality of morning they have been waking into for the preceding years. Not a transformed inner state, a different starting texture. The specific thing that changes is the quality of the transition from sleep to waking activity. In the pre-practice morning, that transition is often a gradual assembly of the fragmented state, the gathering of the analytical and the intuitive and the relational back into the working configuration that the day demands. In the post-practice morning, after the 8 minutes have been given and the neural system has received the specific signal, the transition is shorter and the assembled state is more complete. The fragmented assembly does not disappear. The baseline from which it assembles is higher. Over the weeks of the practice, the higher baseline accumulates. The assembled state of a day that starts from a higher baseline is a more complete and more capable and more fully expressive version of the face I have been describing. The thinking is sharper. The intuition is more accessible. The emotional integration is more reliable in the moments when it is most demanded. The creative access is less intermittent. The quality of the presence available in the relationships that matter most is closer to the quality of the care that is genuinely felt for them. And the spiritual connection, the specific quality of contact available in prayer and reflection, and the quiet moments when the sense of design and purpose and calling makes itself most clear, is deeper and more reliably present. That is the specific texture of the daily shift that the practice produces, not in the language of clinical research, though the clinical research supports every dimension of what I just described, in the language of what it feels like to be a person in the specific daily conditions of a real adult life who has taken 8 minutes in the morning to give the neural system the specific input that the design was always calling for. I want to tell you about 3 people who took the step I am describing and what their specific experience of the restoration produced in their specific daily life. Not because their experience is the promise of your experience, but because their words carry the texture of the specific daily shift that the research predicts and that the practice produces, and hearing the texture in the language of a real person who lived it is a different kind of evidence than the clinical description. The first person is Lisa. Lisa is a graphic designer from San Diego. Before the practice, Lisa described her creative access as having peaks and valleys. The peaks were the days when the ideas arrived easily, and the work carried the quality that made her confident in it. The valleys were the days when the analytical execution was present but the creative depth was not. The peaks were never reliable enough to plan around. After 8 weeks of the practice, Lisa described the valleys becoming shallower and less frequent and the peaks becoming more reliably the ordinary starting point of a creative workday. Not every day was perfect, but the floor, the daily starting point from which the work began, was consistently higher. And the quality of the output in those 8 weeks exceeded what the comparable 8 weeks before the practice had produced by a margin she could measure in delivered client work. I want to tell you about Matthew now. Matthew is from Houston, and his profession required him to bring both analytical precision and interpersonal fluency to the same moments in the same day. The ability to read data and the ability to read people in the same meeting, the same conversation, the same decision. And what Matthew described before the practice was a specific kind of internal friction that had been present for long enough that he had begun to accept it as the natural cost of the kind of work he was doing. When the analytical demand was highest, the interpersonal fluency would reduce. When the relational complexity required the most of him, the analytical clarity would step back. Not enough to make him ineffective. Enough to make him less effective than the work he cared about deserved. After 6 weeks of the practice, Matthew described something he had not expected. The friction did not gradually diminish. It shifted. The specific experience of the two capacities competing for the same mental bandwidth gave way to the experience of both being available at the same time, not interchangeably, simultaneously. The whole brain state is the state in which the analytical left hemisphere and the intuitive, relational right hemisphere are actively coordinating rather than alternating in their contribution to the processing that the moment requires. And Matthew could tell the difference, not because he had been told what to look for, because the daily experience of the work was different in a way that was unmistakable once he had something to compare it to. The third person is Ellie. Ellie is from Manhattan, and she is a clinical social worker. The specific demand of her profession is the capacity to be fully present to people who are in significant pain, to hold the complexity of their experience without either pulling away from it or being absorbed into it, and to maintain the quality of sustained empathetic attention that makes the therapeutic relationship genuinely effective. Before the practice, Ellie described the specific experience of the professional week, depleting her capacity for that presence at a rate that required the entire weekend to rebuild, not because she lacked commitment to the work, because the neural cost of sustained empathetic presence from the fragmented baseline was higher than the neural resource available to sustain it. The week cost more than the well-held. After 10 weeks of the practice, Ellie described a qualitative shift in what the week cost, not zero cost, a different cost, the kind that recovers overnight rather than requiring the weekend. The specific change in what the recovery required is the description of a neural resource being drawn from a larger reservoir, the reservoir that the whole brain state builds through the cumulative practice. The sustained presence that the work demanded was no longer exceeding the sustained resource available to meet it, and the spillover of that into her personal life, into the evenings and the weekends and the relationships that had been receiving the depleted version of her presence, was the part of the testimony that she named as the most significant to her personally. I want to expand what I said about Matthew because his story carries something that most professionals in the second decade of their career will recognize and that deserves more space than a brief summary provides. Matthew had been described by people who knew his work as competent, reliable, and effective, and he was those things. The competence was real, the reliability was real, the effectiveness was real and measurable and recognized. What was not being said, because it was not visible from the outside, was the specific internal cost at which the competence and reliability and effectiveness were being delivered. The cost was this: every day in which the analytical and interpersonal demands were simultaneously present, which was essentially every day, required an internal management of competing cognitive demands that was itself cognitively expensive. The management of the friction was a constant background task that was consuming neural resources that were not available for the work itself. The work was being done from a cognitive net of the full capacity minus the management cost, and the management cost was not trivial. It was the specific cost of a brain trying to do two things that the integrated state does simultaneously, without effort from a state that was fragmenting the two capacities rather than coordinating them. When the practice restored the coordination, what changed was not the capacity for either the analytical or the interpersonal work. Those capacities were already strong. What changed was the background management cost. The friction went away, and the cognitive resource that had been managing the friction became available for the work itself. The result was not a different person at the desk. The same person, with the same knowledge and the same skills and the same commitment, but with the full cognitive resource available to the work, rather than a partial resource after the management cost had been paid. And the specific quality of the work that the full resource produced was the thing that Matthew described as the shift he had not expected but that he now found impossible to imagine working without. I want to offer a similar expansion of Ellie's story because the dimension she represents, the specific neural cost of empathetic professional presence, is something that not only clinical social workers carry, but that applies broadly to anyone whose daily professional life requires them to be fully present to other people in emotionally complex situations. Teachers, pastoral workers, managers who genuinely care about their teams, parents of children with significant needs, medical professionals. Anyone whose work requires the specific quality of empathetic attention that the fragmented baseline makes chronically expensive to sustain. The research on what the integrated brain produces in contexts of sustained interpersonal demand shows something specific and important. The integrated brain does not just perform better on cognitive tasks. It also demonstrates what the research calls enhanced vagal tone, a physiological condition associated with the nervous system regulation that makes sustained empathetic presence possible without the chronic depletion that the fragmented state produces. In plain language, the person operating from the restored whole brain state has more of the specific neural and physiological resource that empathetic presence draws from than the person operating from the fragmented baseline. And the person with more of that resource sustains the presence longer, recovers from the cost of the presence faster, and over time builds rather than depletes the capacity for the kind of care that the work they love most requires. I want to speak now about the face that you carry that is not the face that has been showing up in the world. Because I think there is a specific person in this conversation who knows, with a clarity that the ordinary day does not often allow the space to fully acknowledge, that the face that has been showing up is not the full version of the face that is available. The person who moves through the day with a sustained awareness that there is more in there than what has been coming through, more depth of thinking, more quality of creative access, more fullness of relational presence, more clarity of purpose and direction, more of the spiritual clarity that the deepest prayers have been reaching toward. That awareness is not wishful thinking. It is not an inflated self-image. It is the accurate perception of a person whose design has never left them, whose original operating capacity has not been permanently reduced, whose face as I designed it is still present in the neural architecture that was given to them, and that has simply been operating at the reduced level that the modern world gradually produces in the absence of the specific signal that restores it. You are that person, the person for whom this conversation was arranged, the person who has been carrying the awareness of the fuller face without yet having the specific provision that allows it to show up with consistency and reliability in the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day. And the announcement I am making in this conversation is that the provision is available now, not eventually. The surprise that has been waiting for you is present today. The face that has been waiting to show up fully is one step closer today than it was before this conversation found you. And the step is described in the link in the description below this video. I want to come back to the word surprise. I used it in the title of this conversation. A surprise is waiting for you. And I want to tell you why I use the word surprise rather than the word provision or gift or answer or blessing. I use the word surprise because of the specific relationship between what has been promised and what is arriving, and because the specific form in which the provision is arriving is different from the form that most people who have been in the waiting season have been imagining the provision taking. Most people in a waiting season are waiting for the thing they have been asking for to arrive in the form they have been imagining it would take. The financial breakthrough that comes in the specific form of the opportunity imagined, the relational healing that comes in the specific form of the reconciliation imagined, the creative breakthrough that comes in the form of the specific project imagined, and when the provision does not arrive in the imagined form, the person in the waiting season often does not recognize it as the provision, because the provision that arrives is not the specific form they imagined. It is the specific form that was designed to address the root condition that all of the imagined provisions were reaching toward without being specific enough to address at the root. The surprise is this: what you have been reaching toward, the financial, creative, relational, spiritual fullness that the waiting season has been in tension with, has a specific and common root. The root is the whole brain deficit I have been describing, the specific neural condition that has been reducing the capacity through which the life you were designed to live is expressed. And the surprise is that the provision for the gap is not a breakthrough in one of the specific dimensions that the gap was expressing itself in. It is the restoration of the neural integration that allows all of those dimensions to begin moving toward the designed level simultaneously. You were not waiting for a financial provision. You were waiting for the restoration of the whole brain access that makes financial opportunity perceivable and pursuable. You were not waiting for a creative breakthrough. You were waiting for the restoration of the creative access that the integrated state produces reliably. You were not waiting for a relational healing that arrives from outside. You were waiting for the restoration of the quality of presence that the integrated state makes available in the relationships you care most about. The surprise is that the provision for all of it is the same provision, the restoration of the face, the neural restoration that allows the designed face to show up in all of the dimensions of the designed life simultaneously. I want to speak to the specific texture of what it means to carry the awareness of the fuller face in the conditions of the ordinary day. Because the ordinary day does not create space for the acknowledgement of the gap between the face that is and the face that was designed, the ordinary day creates demands, and the demands are met with whatever is available. And what has been available is what the fragmented baseline provides, which is real and sufficient and in many cases impressive from the outside, but which is, from the inside, consistently less than what the person meeting the demands knows they were designed to bring to them. The specific texture of carrying the awareness of the fuller face in ordinary conditions is a specific kind of low-level friction that most people learn to name as busyness or fatigue or the nature of the adult stage of life. It is the friction of giving fully from a resource that is operating below the designed level of supply, of loving deeply from a presence capacity that is being taxed by the fragmentation, of creating seriously from a creative access that is intermittent rather than reliable, of praying sincerely from a spiritual receptivity that the integrated state would make deeper and more directly connected than the fragmented state allows. The person in the waiting season who has been carrying that friction for long enough that it has become the background of the daily life is the person I am speaking to most directly in this conversation. And the announcement I want to make to that person is that the friction has a name, and the name points to a cause, and the cause has a specific address, and the address is available today. The name of the friction is the whole brain deficit. The cause is the convergence of modern conditions that gradually reduce the cross-hemisphere coordination that the original design calls for. The address is the 8-minute daily practice that Dr. Barone built to deliver the specific neural signal that the coordination responds to with restoration. And the specific address, the link that connects you to the practice today, is in the description below this video. The surprise is the provision, and the provision is available right now. I want to describe the specific person who is at the center of this conversation, not in generic terms. In the specific terms that I have been using throughout to describe what the waiting season has produced and who the waiting season has been forming, the specific person is the one who has been carrying the awareness of the fuller face without yet having the provision that allows the fuller face to express itself consistently. The one who has had enough experience of the peak state, the brief windows of the fully integrated thinking, and the fully present relating, and the fully alive creating, and the fully clear sense of purpose, to know that the peak is real, and that it is more than a fluke, but who has not been able to sustain it or access it on demand. That person has been doing something in the waiting season that most people do not notice because it does not produce visible outcomes. They have been maintaining. They have been sustaining the hope of the fuller face and the care for the people around them, and the commitment to the work they believe they were made for, and the faithfulness to the practice of the spiritual life, all of it from a neural baseline that has been operating below the level it was designed to operate at, and that has therefore been making all of those things harder than they were designed to be. The maintaining is not the destination, it was the preparation. The specific formation that the waiting season produces in a person who carries it with the quality of sustained faithfulness that you have been carrying it with is the formation that makes the arrival of the provision the beginning of something rather than the end of the waiting. The person who has been maintaining in the waiting season is the person who takes the provision and runs with it rather than the person who receives it and rests on it. And the running with it is what produces the specific expression of the restored face in the specific dimensions of the specific life that the design was always reaching toward. The surprise is not just the provision. The surprise is what the person who receives the provision after the specific formation of the specific waiting season does with it. That is, the surprise that has been building. That is what the announcement in the title of this conversation was pointing toward. The waiting season is ending. The provision is here. The face is about to show up, and what it does when it shows up in the specific life of the specific person who has been maintaining through the specific waiting season that formed them for exactly this arrival is the surprise that the waiting was always moving toward. I want to speak now to the person who has a specific response forming to what has been described in this conversation. The response that says, "I have heard language like this before. I have been in the position of the person the conversation is describing, and I have followed the conversation to the link, and I have taken the step, and the experience did not confirm what was described. And I am now more careful about the space between the compelling description and the actual delivery. That person is in this conversation, and I want to speak to that person specifically. The first thing I want to say is that the response is not wrong. The distance between compelling descriptions and actual delivery is a real distance, and it is formed by real experience, and the caution it has produced is reasonable and appropriate. The willingness to assess evidence carefully rather than move on the emotional pull of a resonant description is a quality that I want in the people who are receiving this message. I am not asking you to bypass it. I am asking you to apply it to the specific structure of this specific offer. The specific structure of this offer is different from the structure of the offers that formed the caution. Specifically, it is different in 3 ways that matter. The first is the mechanism. Most things that have promised to address the gap I have been describing have done so without specifying a mechanism that the promise depends on. They have offered practices, disciplines, affirmations, frameworks that are intended to produce change through sustained application without being able to point to the specific neural response that the application triggers. The 8-minute practice built by Dr. Barone is grounded in the specific peer-reviewed research on auditory-induced cross-hemisphere coordination. The mechanism is specific. The neural response is predictable. The connection between the input and the output is not faith in a promise. It is the predictable response of a specific neural architecture to a specific auditory input. The second difference is the community. The over 18,000 people who have taken this step and returned to report their experience are not anonymous testimonials on a marketing page. They are a community of real people in real daily life conditions, who have used the practice in the conditions of their actual life and whose reported experience is the accumulation of evidence that the mechanism works in the real conditions of the real adult day rather than only in the controlled conditions of the laboratory. The third difference is the guarantee. 100%. Unconditional. No questions asked if the experience does not confirm what has been described. The specific thing that this guarantee addresses is the specific risk that the caution was formed to protect against. The risk of reaching toward the provision and not receiving. The risk of the hope being disappointed one more time. The guarantee does not remove the emotional risk of allowing the hope. The emotional risk is yours to carry, regardless of the financial protection, but it removes the financial risk entirely. The test costs you nothing if the experience does not confirm it. The only thing the guarantee cannot protect is the 30 days of practice time that the test requires. And the question that belongs to those 30 days is a simple one. Is finding out worth 30 days of 8-minute morning practices? If the finding out confirms what I have described, the 30 days is the beginning of everything. If it does not confirm it, the 30 days is the answer to a question you have been carrying. I want to give more space to the specific description of what the guarantee means in the context of the specific risk that the person in the waiting season is most sensitive to, because the financial guarantee is often described in a way that makes it sound like a standard consumer protection, and it is that. But for the person who has been in the waiting season and who has learned to protect themselves from the specific disappointment of the hope reaching and not receiving, the guarantee is something more specific than consumer protection. The guarantee is the provision that makes the test a different kind of test than the tests that form the caution. In the previous tests, the tests that the person in the waiting season is protecting against repeating, there was a financial component to the reaching. A payment was made, the experience did not confirm the promise, and the non-confirmation came with a financial loss in addition to the emotional one. The guarantee in this specific offer separates the two risks completely. The financial risk is removed. What remains is the emotional risk of allowing the hope one more time. And the emotional risk is the one that is worth taking when the evidence on the other side of it is as specific and as well supported as the evidence I have been describing in this conversation. I want to name something specific about the previous tools that did not deliver, not to dismiss them. Many of them addressed real dimensions of real experience and produced real shifts in those dimensions. What they did not do was address the root neural condition from which the dimensions they were trying to improve were being limited. The person who practices gratitude from the fragmented baseline may experience more gratitude in the dimensions the gratitude practice addresses. They will not experience the specific shift in the quality of integrated mental function that the whole brain restoration produces, because gratitude practices do not restore cross-hemisphere coordination. The person who practices mindfulness from the fragmented baseline may experience more of the specific benefits that mindfulness research shows. They will not experience the specific neural restoration that the auditory neural sync technology produces, because mindfulness practices operate through different mechanisms. The root condition requires the root address, and the root address is the specific auditory input that the specific neural architecture responds to with the specific cross-hemisphere activation that constitutes the restoration of the designed operating state. Everything else addresses branches. This addresses the root, and when the root is addressed, the branches that were being limited by the root condition begin to express what they were designed to express, without the constant maintenance that addressing only the branches required. I want to say one more thing about why the previous things did not deliver what this is delivering, not as a critique of other approaches, as the specific observation about what the whole brain deficit as a root condition requires in order to be addressed. The previous things, whatever they were, address specific dimensions of the life, specific practices for specific areas, specific tools for specific problems. The specific reason that the whole brain approach is different is that the whole brain deficit is the root condition from which the specific dimensional problems arise. Addressing the dimensions without addressing the root is like treating the symptoms without treating the cause. The symptoms may improve temporarily. The root that produces them remains. What the 8-minute practice addresses is the root, and when the root is addressed, the dimensions begin to express what the designed root always intended them to express. I want to return to the word surprise one more time, because the specific shape of the surprise, the specific unexpectedness of the form in which the provision arrives, is the thing that distinguishes the arrangement from the ordinary provision. You were waiting for something, and what arrived is something that addresses not just the thing you were waiting for, but the root condition from which everything you were waiting for was calling out. The surprise is more comprehensive than the request. The provision is wider than the prayer. And the announcement I am making is that the more comprehensive, wider provision is available today through a link in a description below a video that was placed in your specific path on this specific day. I want to paint a picture of what your life looks like 90 days from the day you take the step I have been describing in this conversation, not as a promise that every dimension of what I describe will look exactly as I describe it, as the specific vision cast of what the research says the cumulative effect of the 8-minute practice over 90 days produces in the specific areas of each person in their daily experience. The vision cast is grounded in the science and confirmed by the community. It is the description of where the trajectory leads. 90 days from the step, the quality of your mornings has changed, not dramatically, noticeably. The starting point of the day is different. The baseline from which the first thoughts arrive and the first plans form and the first interactions of the day begin is elevated from where it was before the practice started. The specific texture of the change is a greater clarity in the first 2 hours of the day, a more reliable access to the quality of thinking that used to arrive only on the best days, a reduced friction in the transition from the quiet of the morning to the demands of the day. The face that shows up to the morning is fuller than the face that showed up before the practice. 90 days from the step. In the area of your professional life, the decisions of the past 90 days carry a different character than the decisions of the 90 days before, not because the information available was different, because the quality of the access to the analytical and intuitive capacities simultaneously, the whole brain access that the integrated state produces, was more reliably present in the moments when the decisions required it. The creative work of the 90 days, if your work involves creativity, has a different quality of depth and originality than the comparable period before. The meetings and conversations of the 90 days, if your work involves people, have a different quality of presence and insight than the comparable period before, not perfected. Different in the direction of the design. 90 days from the step. In the area of your most important relationships, the people who know you most closely have noticed something. They may or may not have named it, but they have felt it. The quality of your availability in the moments when availability matters most has shifted. The conversations that required your full presence have been receiving more of your full presence. The emotional attunement that the people who love you most have been reaching toward in the moments when they most needed it has been more reliably available. Not because you have been trying harder, Because the neural integration that makes full presence reliably available has been building through the 90 days of the practice. 90 days from the step. In the area of your spiritual life, the quality of the daily connection with what is most important to you has shifted. The prayer that was reaching toward contact and finding the contact intermittent is finding it more reliably present, not because the object of the prayer has changed, because the neural state from which the prayer is being offered, the integrated state that produces the specific receptivity that the research describes as the neurological signature of deep contemplative experience, is more consistently available. The sense of being heard, of being in genuine contact with the source of the waiting season and the provision for it, has a different quality than it had before the practice, more direct, less filtered, more fully present to both the offering and the receiving. 90 days from the step. In the area of your sense of purpose and direction, the specific clarity you have been seeking about the specific next thing you are supposed to do with your specific life has begun to arrive, not as a dramatic revelation, as the consistent and growing experience of the integrated mind producing the specific knowing that both the analytical and the intuitive capacities simultaneously available produce. The next step is visible. The direction is clear. The thing you were made for is more tangible as a concrete and pursuable direction than it was in the 90 days of the waiting season before the step was taken. I want to give more specificity to the 90-day picture by describing what the journey through those 90 days feels like in the first 3 phases. Because most people who imagine 90 days imagine it as a single uniform experience. And the reality is that the 90 days has a specific arc. And the arc matters because knowing the arc makes the first phase receivable with the right frame rather than the wrong one. The first phase is the noticing phase. It runs roughly through the first 2 to 3 weeks of the practice. In this phase, the change is present but subtle. The person is beginning to notice a difference but is not yet confident naming it. The quality of the morning is slightly different. The mental friction is slightly less. The creative and analytical access is slightly more reliable. But it is subtle enough that the person might, without the frame I am providing now, interpret it as natural variation rather than as the early evidence of a specific neural shift. The noticing phase is not the most dramatic phase. It is the most important, because the willingness to notice the subtle and stay with the practice through the subtlety is what allows the subtle to become the unmistakable. The second phase runs roughly from weeks 3 through 6. In this phase, the shift has become named. The person can now describe with more confidence what is different and how. The analytical clarity is sharper in the mornings. The creative access is more reliable across more days than before. The emotional integration is more available in the situations that most demand it. The quality of the presence available in the most important relationships is measurably different. The person is now accumulating a track record of days that compare favorably to the comparable days before the practice. The confidence in the shift builds through this phase, and the motivation to continue comes from the evidence rather than from the commitment to continue. The third phase runs from roughly week 6 through week 12, and is the phase in which the shift becomes the new ordinary, not new and exciting, ordinary. The higher baseline is the starting point rather than the improvement from the previous starting point. The face that is showing up is the designed face becoming the expected face rather than the occasional face. And the expectation of it is itself evidence that the designed baseline is being restored rather than just visited. The person in the third phase has moved from testing the practice to depending on it the way they depend on the other daily inputs that maintain the quality of the life they are building. That is the 90-day vision, the face fully showing up across all of the dimensions it was designed to express, not perfectly, not without the ordinary challenges and difficulties of an ordinary life, but from a baseline that is qualitatively different from the baseline of the waiting season, a baseline that the practice builds and sustains and deepens with each accumulated day of the 8 minutes. The face I described at the beginning of this conversation, the designed face, the face that was present in the earliest years and that the conditions of the modern world gradually reduced, is the face that begins to arrive as the ordinary starting point of the ordinary day, 90 days into the practice. The link that takes you to the beginning of those 90 days is in the description below this video. Today is the day the 90 days can begin. I want to speak over your face right now, not the face in the mirror, the face I have been describing since the beginning of this conversation, the designed face. The face that was given to you and that the waiting season has been preparing to reveal. The face that the restoration I have been describing will allow to show up fully in the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day. I declare over your face that the fullness is coming, not eventually, as a promise for a distant future, as the description of what begins when the step I have been describing is taken. The neural restoration that the 8-minute practice initiates is the beginning of the face showing up in the fullness of the design, not the occasional peak of the best days. The ordinary daily expression of what you were made to express. I speak this over the face that is receiving this message right now. The fullness is coming. It begins with the step. The step is available today. I declare over your mind that the ceiling that has been limiting the quality of thinking available to you is coming down. Not the ceiling you put up through lack of effort or lack of care. The ceiling that the interhemispheric fragmentation produced without your knowledge or consent. The ceiling that has been making the analytical and the intuitive compete with each other for the same bandwidth rather than coordinating the way they were designed to. I declare that the ceiling is coming down and that the quality of thinking available from the integrated state, the thinking that arrives when both hemispheres are coordinating at the level the design calls for, is what the face I am addressing will be thinking from as the ordinary starting point of the ordinary day. I declare over your creative life that the access that has been intermittent is becoming reliable, that the depth that was available only on the best days is becoming the ordinary floor, that the work you were made to make, the specific creative contribution that only your specific integrated mind can produce, is about to find the access to itself that the fragmented state has been narrowing. I declare this over the face that was designed to create and that has been creating from partial access to the full creative resource it was given. I declare over your relationships that the presence you have been trying to bring to the people who matter most to you and that has been arriving at partial depth is about to arrive at full depth, not because you will love more. You already love deeply, because the neural integration that makes love fully expressible in the moment when the people you love most need the full expression of it will be more reliably available from the restored baseline. I declare that the relationships that have been receiving the face that was giving everything it had access to are about to receive the face that has access to everything it was designed to give. I declare over your finances that the ideas that have been forming below the surface and the opportunities that have been visible but not fully pursuable, and the creative and analytical capacity that the integrated state makes available for the building of the material provision that your life and calling requires is about to find the access it has been reaching toward, not as a prosperity declaration disconnected from mechanism, as the specific declaration of what happens when the whole brain state is available to the person whose work requires the full coordination of both hemispheres to fully express the provision it was designed to generate. I want to expand the declarations with more of the specific detail that the face being addressed needs to hear, not the generic version of the declaration. The specific version that belongs to the specific person who has been in the specific waiting season that this conversation has been describing. I declare over your health that the restoration of the integrated neural state is not only a cognitive and spiritual event. The research on what the cross-hemisphere coordination produces in the full human system shows that the integrated state carries physiological benefits that extend beyond the mind into the body that the mind inhabits. The regulation of the nervous system that the integrated state produces reduces the specific kind of chronic low-level physiological stress that the fragmented state maintains. The immune function, the hormonal regulation, the sleep quality, the recovery capacity, all of these are influenced by the quality of the neural integration in ways that the research on mind-body connection has been establishing for decades. I declare over the body that carries the face I am addressing that the restoration of the integrated state begins a cascade of physical effects that the design always intended as the byproduct of the mind operating at the level it was designed to operate at. I declare over your emotional life that the specific quality of emotional intelligence that the integrated state makes available is arriving, not the emotional intelligence of the person who has worked hard to develop emotional awareness. The emotional intelligence of the person whose neural integration allows the emotional and analytical systems to coordinate rather than compete, producing the specific quality of emotional clarity that knows what is felt, why it is felt, what it requires, and how to respond to it from a place of integration rather than reaction. I declare that the face I am addressing is moving into the season of integrated emotional life, the season in which the emotions serve the design rather than being managed against it. I declare over your time that the quality of the daily hours is changing. Not the quantity, the same 24 hours, but the specific neural state from which those 24 hours are lived is changing. The same morning contains more of what the morning was designed to produce when the integrated baseline is the starting point rather than the fragmented one. The same hour of creative work contains more actual creation. The same hour of relational presence contains more actual presence. The same hour of prayer contains more actual contact. The restoration of the baseline does not give more time. It gives more of the designed life per unit of time already available, which is itself the specific provision that the waiting season was always reaching toward in all of its specific dimensions. I declare over your spiritual life that the contact that has been partial is becoming fuller, that the receiving that has been filtered is becoming more direct, that the sense of being heard and of hearing back that the waiting season has been producing at reduced depth is about to deepen to the level that the integrated state makes available. The integrated mind is the mind that the contemplative traditions of every culture that has addressed the experience of spiritual contact have described as the mind that receives most fully. The undivided mind, the mind that is fully present to both the offering and the receiving. I declare that this is the mind that the practice restores, and that this mind is what is about to show up in the spiritual life of the face I am addressing. And I declare over the waiting season that it is ending, not as a wish, as the announcement of an arrangement that was made before this conversation began, and that this conversation is the announcement of. The waiting season was real, the cost was real, the faithfulness through it was real, and the provision at the end of it is real. The link in the description below this video is the current and accessible address of the provision today, on this specific day. The waiting season is ending. I want to tell you the complete description of what is available through the link in the description below this video, not the summary I have been building toward, the complete description. Because the person who has stayed through this entire conversation deserves to know exactly what the step I have been describing gives access to. The complete package is this: the 8-minute daily auditory sequence that Dr. Barone built using neural sync technology to produce the specific cross-hemisphere coordination that the research identifies as the signature of restored whole brain function. Delivered through headphones, eyes closed, no other technique required. The sequence provides the specific auditory input. The neural system provides the specific response. The response is the restoration. That is the core of what the link accesses. With the core sequence come 4 bonuses. I want to describe all 4 specifically because they are not generic add-ons. Each one was selected by Dr. Barone because it serves a specific function in relation to the restoration the sequence initiates. The first bonus is a guided visualization developed by a practitioner whose specific expertise is the use of the whole brain state for the deepest and most effective form of mental rehearsal. The research on mental rehearsal shows that the whole brain state produces significantly more vivid, more specific, and more neurologically impactful visualization than the fragmented state. The first bonus gives you a guided process for using the state the sequence creates to do the most effective visualization work available to an ordinary person in an ordinary setting, specifically for the areas of health, finances, relationships, and purpose. The second bonus is a practical guide to the specific foods in an ordinary grocery store that the research most consistently associates with the kind of low-level neural inflammation that counteracts the cross-hemisphere coordination the sequence builds, not a diet plan. A specific and practical guide to what reduces and what supports the neural environment in which the restoration occurs. And alongside that, 5 specific grocery strategies that reduce monthly food spending by over $100 while moving toward the nutritional environment that supports rather than undermines the restoration. The third bonus is a classic text, over 100 years old, that Dr. Barone includes because he has found in his clinical work that the specific ideas in this text are most deeply received and most practically applicable when the reader is in the whole brain state the sequence produces. The text addresses the relationship between the quality of thought and the quality of the life that thought produces. In the fragmented state, the text is interesting. In the integrated state, it is transformative. The third bonus gives you the text and the instruction to read it in the state the sequence creates. The fourth bonus is a one-page printable visual reference summarizing the 5 daily habits most consistently associated in both the research and the community experience, with the sustained expression of the transformation the sequence initiates, not a complex program. A one-page reference for the daily environment that supports what the sequence builds. I want to speak to the specific decision that is in front of you right now, not the decision in the abstract. The specific decision, in the specific moment, of a person who has been in a conversation about a specific provision and who is now at the place where the description ends and the action begins. The decision has a specific structure. On one side of it is the continuation of the waiting season, the same quality of daily life that the fragmented baseline has been producing, the same face that has been showing up, not worse, the same ceiling on the thinking, the same intermittency of the creative access, the same gap between the care that is genuinely felt and the quality of presence that arrives in the relational moments that most require it. The same quality of spiritual reaching that the fragmented state has been both motivating and partially muffling. The continuation of the waiting season is not a catastrophe. You have been living it, and you have been doing so with a quality of faithfulness that I want to name and honor. It is simply the continuation of what has been. On the other side of the decision is the beginning of the trajectory I described, the first 8-minute practice, the first subtle shift in the morning quality, the first week of accumulation, the first confident noticing of the difference, the first month of the rising floor, the first 90 days of the restoration of the designed face, the face that the waiting season was always preparing to reveal. The $39 is not what separates the two sides of the decision. The guarantee ensures that the $39 is not a permanent cost. What separates the two sides is the decision itself, the specific internal act of choosing the trajectory that begins with the step rather than the trajectory that continues without it. And the specific internal act is available to you right now, in this moment, before this conversation ends and the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day begin to reclaim the specific clarity and motivation and desire for the restoration that this conversation has produced in you. I want to say one specific thing about the timing of the decision and why I keep returning to it. The quality of the internal state that a person is in immediately after a conversation like this one is a different quality than the state they are in an hour later when the ordinary demands of the ordinary day have resumed. The specific activation of the desire for the restoration, the specific clarity about the gap and the provision and the step, the specific openness to the decision is at its highest in this moment. Not because I am creating artificial urgency, because the specific content of this conversation has produced a specific internal state in you that is the most favorable state in which to make the specific decision that the content is pointing toward. And the favorable state has a duration. It is measured in minutes, not in hours. The decision made in this moment is the decision made in the highest quality state available for making it. The price for the complete package, the sequence, all 4 bonuses, and lifetime access to all of it is $39. I want to say that number in context. The colleagues of Dr. Barone, who were involved in the early evaluation of what he built, assessed its professional value at $500. The first public offering was at $49. The price available today through the link in the description of this video is $39, not as a temporary discount that will expire in a specific number of minutes, as the price that reflects the specific commitment that this conversation represents to making the restoration available to the specific person who has been in the waiting season and who is encountering it today. $39, one payment, lifetime access, the complete sequence, all 4 bonuses, and a 100% unconditional money-back guarantee that says if you give the practice the time the research indicates it requires and the experience does not confirm what has been described, every dollar returns to you. No questions, no partial refund. Every dollar. That is the complete offer. The link is in the description. The face I have been describing is one step closer to showing up fully. If you are just arriving in this conversation, I want to welcome you. And I want to give you the essential summary of what has been described before you joined, so that you have enough context to receive what is still coming, which is the most important section of the conversation. This conversation opened with the announcement that a surprise is waiting for you, and it opened with the instruction to wait a little longer, not as a delay, as the announcement that the thing you have been waiting for is very close. And then it spent the early sections describing the specific nature of the surprise and why the waiting has felt as long as it has. Here is the summary. The gap between the face you were designed to show up with, the thinking and creativity and relational presence and spiritual clarity that the design calls for, and the face that has been available in your adult daily life, is a neural gap. Specifically, it is the gap produced by the gradual reduction of the cross-hemisphere coordination in your brain that the conditions of modern adult life produce over time. The left hemisphere and the right hemisphere are designed to coordinate actively. When they coordinate at the designed level, the result is the whole brain state that produces the quality of daily experience I described as the designed face. When the coordination is reduced, the result is the fragmented state that produces the face that has been available at the reduced level. The reduction is not permanent. The neural system is plastic. It responds to the right input with the restoration of the coordination. And the right input is a specific 8-minute daily auditory sequence built by a neurologist from New York named Dr. Barone, using a technology called neural sync. The sequence delivers the specific auditory signal that the neural system responds to with the restoration of active cross-hemisphere coordination. 8 minutes. Headphones. Eyes closed. That is the complete input required. The surprise that is waiting for you is this specific provision, not a practice that requires years of dedication, not a discipline that depends on willpower and sustainability. An 8-minute daily sequence that delivers the specific input and lets the neural system provide the specific response it was designed to provide when it receives that input. The restoration is the natural result of the right input reaching the right architecture. You do not have to build or develop anything. You provide the 8 minutes and the headphones and the quiet space. The neural system provides the restoration. Over 18,000 people have taken the step of accessing this provision, not a controlled group in a research setting. People in the ordinary conditions of ordinary adult life, with ordinary schedules and ordinary demands and ordinary starting points, who gave the practice the time the research says it requires and who reported back the specific shifts in the quality of their daily experience that the research predicts. Lisa from San Diego and her creative access, Matthew from Houston and his professional integration, Ellie from Manhattan and her sustained empathetic presence. All of them, and the 18,000 others, are the community of people who took the step before you and who came back to confirm that the surprise was real. I want to speak to what it means that this specific conversation was placed in your path on this specific day, because the day matters in a way that the ordinary content delivery system does not account for in its mechanism, even though the mechanism is what delivered it. You have been in a season, not just a week or a month, a season. The specific kind of sustained period of a life that has a character and a direction and a specific quality of inner experience that distinguishes it from the ordinary flow of ordinary time. The waiting season, the season in which something is being carried forward in hope that has not yet been fully received. And the specific characteristic of the waiting season that makes the day on which the provision arrives significant is this. The waiting season prepares the person for the provision in a way that the provision received without the waiting season would not have been fully received. What you have been going through has been forming you for this. Not punishing you, not withholding from you, forming you. Building in you the specific depth of desire and the specific quality of readiness and the specific degree of openness to the provision that makes the receiving of it something more than an acquisition. The person who receives the provision after the waiting season receives it as the answer to a specific and sustained question that the question has had time to fully form. And the answer to a fully formed question is a different kind of receiving than the answer to a question that was asked casually. I want to say something specific about the 18,000 people who have already taken the step I am describing and what their taking of it means for the person who is considering it now, not as generic social proof. As a specific observation about what a community of 18,000 people with confirmed experiences represents in terms of evidence. The research that informs the mechanism was conducted in controlled settings with specific populations under specific conditions. What the 18,000 represent is the transfer of that research finding into the ordinary conditions of ordinary life. They are the evidence that what the research predicts in controlled conditions also occurs in the real conditions of real adult daily life. And the pattern of what they report, the rising floor, the more reliable creative access, the deeper relational presence, the clearer spiritual contact, the more integrated professional function, is the pattern that the research predicts. which is the specific kind of evidence that transforms a compelling description into a reasonable expectation. The complete package that the link in the description below accesses is this: the 8-minute daily sequence. 4 bonuses including a guided visualization for the whole brain state, a nutrition guide that reduces neural inflammation and grocery spending simultaneously, a classic text that Dr. Barone recommends for the integrated mind, and a 1-page daily habits reference. Lifetime access to all of it, 1 payment of $39, and a full, unconditional, 100% money-back guarantee that says if the experience does not confirm what has been described, every dollar returns to you without question. The waiting season that this conversation opened by acknowledging is ending. The surprise that the title announced is this specific provision available right now through the link in the description. And the little longer that the title asked you to wait is over. The wait is done, the provision is current, the link is below, the face is about to show up. Comment yes below if you are going to the description right now. Comment wait if you are still in this conversation but you intend to go before it ends. Either way, the link is there. And what is waiting there is the beginning of what this conversation has been describing. I want to speak about your face one more time before the conversation moves into its final sections, because I have been using the word throughout and I want to close the loop on what it means in the fullest sense that this conversation has been reaching toward. Your face, in the language I have been using, is the complete expression of your design in the world, not just the thinking, not just the creativity, not just the relational presence, all of it. The specific, unrepeatable, irreducible expression of what was placed in you and what has been trying to come through in all of the areas of your daily life that this conversation has been describing. The face is the totality of the design arriving in the reality of the daily lived experience. And the face that is about to show up is not the face of a different person. It is the face of you, operating from the neural baseline that the design was always calling for, expressing through the daily life what the design has always been trying to express through the fragmented baseline, but at reduced capacity. The restoration does not change who you are, it restores the level at which who you are is expressed. And the difference between the expression at the reduced level and the expression at the designed level is the specific difference that this conversation has been describing as the waiting season and its end. I want to name something specific about the face that shows up after the restoration that is different from what most people imagine when they imagine the restoration. They imagine the extraordinary, the dramatic change. The moments of peak experience that demonstrate the restoration has occurred, and those moments are real, they do come, but the restoration is not primarily expressed in the peaks. It is expressed in the ordinary, in the quality of the ordinary morning and the ordinary conversation and the ordinary hour of work and the ordinary moment of prayer. The restoration is the elevation of the ordinary to the level that the design was always pointing toward, and the elevated ordinary is what the face shows up as when the restoration is complete. I want to give more space to the cycle breaker identity because I think it carries something that the ordinary language of spiritual blessing tends to keep in the abstract and that deserves to be made concrete. The cycle breaker is a person who is standing at a specific point in a lineage, not the middle of the lineage, where the pattern continues in both directions, not the end of the lineage, where the impact of what was changed is no longer visible to the person who changed it, the beginning of a different direction, the person at the hinge point. The person whose specific choices in this specific season change what the next chapter of the lineage looks like. The hinge points in the story of a family or a community are almost never visible as hinge points at the moment they occur. They become visible in retrospect, when the people who followed them look back and try to identify the moment when the direction changed. And the answer is almost always a specific person who made a specific choice at a specific moment that looked, from the outside, like an ordinary choice. A $39 access, an 8-minute daily commitment, a step taken toward a provision that had a specific and credible mechanism and a specific and protective guarantee, that kind of choice. The ordinary choice that is simultaneously a hinge point. I want to speak to the specific cost that the cycle breaker pays that is not the financial cost and not the time cost, and that is actually the most significant cost of the step, the cost of being the first. The cost of taking a step toward a provision without the proof that the provision will work for you specifically in your specific life. The cost of allowing the hope knowing that the hope has been disappointed before and that the disappointment produced the specific protection that the hope now has to pass through in order to become action. That cost is real, and the person who pays it, who allows the hope to become action in the face of the specific history of previous disappointments, is the person who changes the trajectory. Not for themselves alone, for everyone who comes after them in the story of their life and lineage. I want to honor that cost by being very clear about the specific structure that reduces it. The guarantee reduces the financial dimension of the cost to zero. The specific mechanism grounded in peer-reviewed research reduces the credibility gap that the hope has to cross. The community of over 18,000 people who have confirmed the experience reduces the isolation of being first, because you are not actually first. You are joining a community of over 18,000 people who paid the same cost of hope before you and who came back to confirm that the provision was real. And the specific framing of the waiting season that this conversation has offered, the naming of the formation and the announcement of the arrival, reduces the psychological distance between the waiting and the receiving. The cost of being the first is real. The structure of this specific provision has been built to be as close to zero as the structure of a provision can be, while still requiring the act of hope that a provision always requires. I want to speak to you as a cycle breaker, because that is what you are. The person in this conversation who has been carrying the waiting season with the quality of sustained faithfulness that the waiting season requires is not only carrying it for their own season. They are carrying it for the people who come after them, the children who will be raised by a parent whose face, after the restoration, is a different quality of presence than the face that the reduced baseline produced. The people in the spheres of influence that the restored face will touch in the decades after the restoration begins. The specific next generation of the family or the community or the professional world that will receive the model of what the designed face looks like when it shows up consistently from the restored baseline. The cycle that the restoration breaks is the cycle of the reduced baseline being passed on as the ordinary, not through deliberate transmission. Through the modeling that the people around you receive as the implicit definition of what ordinary adult life looks and feels like from the inside. The parent who operates from the restored baseline gives the children around them a different model of what ordinary is. The teacher who operates from the restored baseline gives the students around them a different experience of what full presence feels like. The leader who operates from the restored baseline gives the community around them a different experience of what integrated leadership produces. The $39 and the 8 minutes a day are not just for your next season. They are the beginning of what the people after you inherit as their baseline model of what is ordinary. And the surprising thing about that inheritance is that it does not require anything from them. It does not require a program or a practice or a specific commitment. It requires only that the person who forms their baseline model of ordinary is operating from the designed baseline rather than the reduced one. The restoration is the most significant thing you can do for the people who come after you, and it costs 8 minutes and $39 and begins with the link in the description below this video. Comment done if you have already been to the link. Comment yes if you are going now, and if neither applies yet, comment waiting and stay for what comes next. Because what comes next is for the person who is still processing and still deciding, and who needs just a little more before the step is available. I said in the previous section that what comes next is for the person who is still processing, so I want to speak to that person now, not to pressure, to address the specific thing that is still between them and the step. The person who is still processing after a conversation this long and this specific is not processing because they lack the information. They have the information, the mechanism is clear, the evidence is clear, the community is named, the guarantee is stated, the price is known, the link is in the description. There is nothing about the offer that has not been described. The processing is not about information. The processing is about something that the information cannot directly address. It is about the specific internal movement that takes a person from the state of knowing about a provision to the state of acting toward it. That movement is not a cognitive act. It is a volitional one. The deciding, the specific act of the will that says yes to the possibility and moves toward the receiving, rather than continuing to stand in the position of the one who is considering whether to move. I want to describe what the processing actually is in more specific terms, because naming the thing that is happening often reduces the power it has to extend itself indefinitely. The processing, for most people in this specific position, is the activity of the protective part of the mind that is learned from the specific history of reaching without receiving. That movement toward a provision is the specific moment of highest risk. And the protective activity is to extend the processing, to find one more thing to consider, to delay the moment of movement long enough that the quality of the internal state that the conversation produced, the specific openness and desire and readiness, fades to a level at which the movement is no longer available. I am not saying this to shame the protection. The protection learned what it learned from real experience, and it is doing exactly what it was built to do. I am saying it because the person who recognizes the pattern in real time, in this specific moment, while the internal state produced by this conversation is still present, has the specific advantage that recognition provides. The recognition says this is the protection extending the processing, and this is what it has always done at exactly this moment in exactly this kind of encounter. And the recognition creates a moment of choice that the extension of the processing without recognition does not create. You can choose, right now, to let the processing end, not by suppressing the protection, by recognizing that the processing has done its work. It has assessed the evidence. It has evaluated the guarantee. It has considered the mechanism. It has noted the community. It has weighed the history of previous disappointments against the specific structure of this specific offer, and found that the structure of this offer is different from the structure of the offers that produce the history. The processing is complete. What remains is the step. I want to walk you through the specific next 4 minutes. Right now, before the processing resumes, you go to the description of this video, you find the link, you click it. You are taken to the page where the access is available for $39. You complete the straightforward transaction. You receive confirmation of the access. You bookmark the page or note the access point, and in the morning, or in the next quiet moment available to you, you put in your headphones and you give the 8 minutes to the first practice. That is the complete sequence of actions. The total time from this moment to the completion of the first practice is approximately 30 minutes. The total financial cost is $39 that the guarantee holds in reserve pending your experience. 4 minutes to complete the transaction, 8 minutes for the first practice, and the beginning of what this entire conversation has been pointing toward. I want to name the specific thing that stands between knowing and deciding for most people in this specific kind of conversation. It is the feeling that once the step is taken, the outcome of the step becomes something that can be confirmed or disconfirmed. And the confirmation or disconfirmation will tell the person something about the specific question that the step is asking. Not whether the provision works in general, whether the provision works for them specifically, whether the specific design I have been describing applies to the specific person taking the step, whether the face I have been addressing in this entire conversation is the face that receives what I have been describing. That specific question carries a specific vulnerability, and the vulnerability is real. The step opens the person to finding out whether the thing that has been described about them, the design, the capacity, the face that the restoration reveals, is the accurate description of who they actually are. And the finding out is a test of something that most people, in their deepest interior, have wondered about in the quietest moments of the waiting season. The guarantee protects the financial dimension of that test. What it does not protect is the specific vulnerability of allowing the hope and finding out what the hope encounters when it moves from the position of the one who is considering to the position of the one who is moved. That vulnerability is the real cost of the step, and the person who takes the step with that vulnerability present, who moves toward the provision knowing that the provision is going to tell them something real about the specific accuracy of what has been said about them, is the person who is doing the most important thing that can be done in the specific moment this conversation has produced. I want to say something about what is on the other side of that vulnerability for the person who takes the step. What the community of over 18,000 people who have taken it found on the other side is not only the confirmation of the mechanism. They found the confirmation of the description of themselves, the description that says the design is real, the capacity is real, the face that the restoration reveals is the accurate face, the face that was always there and that the waiting season was always moving toward. The person who finds that confirmation on the other side of the step finds something more significant than a product that delivered on its promise. They find the specific experiential evidence that the thing that has been known in the interior of the waiting season, the knowledge that more was available, the awareness of the fuller face, was not an inflated self-image or a wishful projection. It was an accurate perception of a real capacity that the restoration makes available in the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day. I want to speak the price one final time for the person still processing, $39, today, through the link in the description below, lifetime access, full guarantee. The face that this entire conversation has been about is one step away from beginning to show up at the level it was designed to show up at. The processing can end here. The step is available right now. I want to tell you what the comment section of this video and the community of people who have taken the step I have been describing are saying right now, not as a general claim about testimonials, as a specific report on the texture of what people in the restoration describe when they come back to share what the step produced. The most consistent thing that people write in the comments in the weeks after the step is not about the dramatic, it is about the floor, the specific texture of the daily starting point, the quality of the morning before the demands of the day begin. The specific thing that people keep returning to is the description of the morning being different, not transformed, different. The starting point of the day is different in the specific way that the research predicts and that the practice delivers. What people describe about the morning is this: the transition from waking to the full engagement of the day that used to take an hour or more of gradual assembly now happens in the first 30 minutes after the practice, not because they are moving faster or trying harder, because the integrated baseline is already available from the 8 minutes rather than requiring the first hour of the day to gradually come together. The assembled mind is available sooner, and the assembled mind that the restoration produces is more complete than the assembled mind that the hour of gradual assembly produced before the practice. I want to read back something that belongs to this conversation that was said near the beginning, and that I want to give a new layer of meaning now that the middle of the conversation has established the context for it. At the beginning of this conversation, I announced a surprise, and I said it was about your face. I have been describing what I meant by that for this entire conversation, but there is one dimension of the face that I have not addressed yet, and that I want to address now. The face is what the world receives from you, not just the inner quality I have been describing, the outer expression, the face that shows up in the room, the face that the people who love you see when they look at you, the face that the people you work with experience when they are in the presence of your thinking and your energy and your engagement with the world. The surprise about your face is not only that the inner quality of the face is being restored, it is that the outer expression, the face that the world receives, is about to change. Not in the way that a cosmetic change changes the face, in the way that an inner change changes the face. The quality of presence that the integrated state produces is visible, not as a performance, as the natural expression of a person whose inner system is coordinating at the level it was designed to coordinate at. The people around you will notice, not because you tell them, because the face that shows up when the restoration is underway is a different face than the face that has been showing up, and the difference will be perceptible to the people who have been in the presence of the previous face and who are now in the presence of the restored one. I want to give you 3 more specific accounts from the community before the conversation moves to its closing section, not the full testimonials. The specific moments from each account that carry the most direct evidence of what the restoration produces in the face that the world sees. A woman who describes herself as a teacher and a mother of 3 wrote in the community that the first thing she noticed after the 3rd week of the practice was not the improvement in her professional performance or her creative output, though both of those came. The first thing she noticed was that her youngest child, who was 5 at the time, started coming to find her more often in the evenings, not for anything specific, just to be near her, and she said that she understood what this meant because she had worked enough with child development to know that young children are exquisitely sensitive to the quality of presence available in the adults they are most attached to. The 5-year-old was responding to something in the quality of the face that was showing up in the evenings, something that was more available than it had been before. The child had noticed the restoration before the mother had named it. A man who describes himself as a pastor and who leads a community of several hundred people wrote that he had been effective in his work for many years and that the effectiveness was real. He had built something. People were being served. Lives were being touched. But he described a specific gap between the quality of the conversations he was having in the formal contexts of his ministry, where he was prepared and focused and had the full cognitive resource of preparation behind him, and the quality of the conversations he was having in the informal contexts, the hallway conversations, the spontaneous moments of genuine pastoral encounter. where the formal preparation was not available, and the quality of presence that the moment required had to come from the available baseline rather than from preparation. After 6 weeks of the practice, he described the hallway conversations as having a different quality, not because he was better prepared for them, because the baseline from which they were being conducted was different. The quality of integrated presence available in the unscripted moment was closer to the quality of presence available in the prepared one, and his description of what this meant for the people in those moments, the people who encountered the pastor in the hallway rather than in the pulpit, was that they were receiving a more complete version of the care that he genuinely had for them, and that had previously been only partially accessible in the unstructured setting. A woman who describes herself as an entrepreneur wrote that the specific change she noticed first was in the quality of the decisions she was making in the earliest hours of the day, the hours that are the most cognitively fresh and that she had always used for the highest leverage thinking of the workday. She described the quality of those early morning decisions in the weeks after the practice began as carrying a different character, not more confident in the sense of less doubt, more integrated. The analytical and the intuitive components of the decision were both more fully present and more clearly in dialogue with each other. She said that the decisions she made in those early hours in the weeks following the practice had a quality of rightness to them that she recognized as different from the quality of the decisions made in the comparable period before. And she described 2 specific business decisions made in that period as having outcomes that she attributed directly to the quality of the integrated thinking available in the morning hours of the practice weeks. This is the specific surprise about your face, not just the inner quality, the outer expression, the way you show up in the world, the face that the people who matter most to you see when they look at you, the face that your presence gives to the room when you enter it, the face that is about to change not because you are changing who you are, but because who you are is about to have access to itself at the level it was designed to operate at. And the people who notice will not necessarily know what changed. They will simply notice that something is different, that the quality of your presence has shifted, that the conversation with you is producing something it was not producing before, that the face you are showing up with is more fully what they always sensed was available in you than the face that had been showing up previously. The surprise is not only for you, it is for everyone who encounters the face that the restoration reveals. Comment surprised if you are receiving this, and then go to the link, because what they are about to encounter in you begins with the step that is available right now. I want to speak to the title of this conversation one more time, because the title has 2 parts, and I want to close both of them with the fullness they deserve. The first part is, wait a little longer. The second part is, a surprise is waiting for you. I opened by asking you to wait, and I want to tell you now that the waiting I asked you to do was the waiting of this conversation, the waiting that the conversation required, not more waiting after the conversation ends. The little longer I asked for was the length of this conversation, the time between the title and this specific moment, and this specific moment is the moment when the wait ends and the surprise is receivable. The surprise is waiting for you. Present tense, active waiting. The provision is not a concept that will become available at some future point. It is a current arrangement that is available right now through a link in the description below this video for $39 with a full guarantee. The surprise that has been arranged for the specific person in the specific waiting season has been holding in the position of availability, waiting for the person who was promised it to arrive at the moment when the announcement of it could be received with the fullness it was designed to be received with. And this is that moment. You have heard the announcement. You have been given the specific description of the surprise and the mechanism and the evidence and the price and the guarantee and the community and the trajectory and the specific texture of what the restoration produces in the specific dimensions of the specific daily life. You have been given everything that the announcement was designed to give. And the surprise is current. It is available. The link is in the description. The window is open. I want to tell you what happens on the day after you take the step, because I think the quality of the day after matters in a way that most people do not think about before the step, and that understanding it changes the experience of the step itself. The day after the step is not the day of the dramatic shift. It is the day of the first accumulation. The first 8 minutes have been given. The neural system has received the specific signal. The specific cross-hemisphere coordination that the research describes as the response to the signal has been initiated, and the day begins from a baseline that is, in the subtlest but most real way, different from the baseline of the day before. Not because the first 8 minutes transform the accumulated state of years, because the first 8 minutes begin the accumulation in the opposite direction. The accumulated state has been drifting in the direction of fragmentation for years. The first practice is the first day of the drift in the direction of restoration. The day after the step is the day of the new direction, not the arrival at the destination, the turning of the direction. And the specific quality of the day that begins with the new direction is the specific quality of a day that is building rather than continuing the previous trajectory. The decisions made on the day of the new direction are made from the first increment of the restored baseline. The interactions of the day are conducted from the first increment of the restored presence. The creative work of the day is done from the first increment of the restored access. Each increment is small. The accumulation of the increments is what produces the 90-day picture. I want to speak to what happens in the week after the step because the first week is the most important week in terms of the commitment to continue, not because the most dramatic evidence arrives in the first week. Because the evidence that does arrive in the first week, if received with the right frame, is the evidence that carries the person through the first 3 weeks and into the phase where the evidence becomes more confident and the continuation becomes self-motivated. The evidence that arrives in the first week is the evidence of the noticing. The morning is slightly different. The transition into the day is slightly easier. The quality of the first hour of the day is slightly better. The mental friction is slightly less. And the person who holds the frame that what they are noticing is the first accumulation of the specific neural restoration, the research predicts will hold through the subtlety and continue into the confidence. The person who holds the frame that what they are noticing might be placebo or might be natural variation will discount the evidence and reduce the probability of continuing through the accumulation period that produces the unmistakable. I am giving you the frame now so that when you encounter the evidence in the first week, you have the context to receive it correctly. The slight difference is real. The morning shift is real. The reduced friction is real. It is the first evidence of the restoration that the practice initiates. Stay with it. The accumulation is what produces everything I have described, and the accumulation begins the day after the step is taken. Today, I want to speak plainly about the window because I have not used the word in this conversation as often as the content warrants. The window is the specific period in which the specific price and the specific access level that I have been describing is available. The $39 price through the link below is the window price. It is not the standard retail price for what Dr. Barone built. It is the specific arrangement that makes the provision accessible to the specific person in the specific season of a waiting season who is encountering it through this conversation today. The window has duration. The duration is not infinite, and I am not saying this to produce artificial urgency. I am saying it because the honest description of what is available and when it is available is the most respectful thing I can offer to the person who is genuinely deciding. And the honest description is that the window for the specific arrangement I have been describing is the window of today, not in the sense that the clock runs out at midnight, in the sense that the specific convergence of the clarity produced by this conversation and the motivation produced by the length and sincerity of the waiting season and the availability of the $39 access and the fullness of the guarantee is a convergence that exists in this moment, and that the continuation of the ordinary daily life after this conversation ends will begin to dissolve. The person who takes the step in this window takes it from the highest quality internal state for taking it that this season is likely to produce. The person who waits until later, until after the ordinary conditions of the day have reclaimed the space that this conversation opened, takes it from a different and lower quality internal state, not a worse person. A person in a state that is less favorable to the specific decision. And the quality of the internal state from which the decision is made influences the quality of the commitment to stay with the practice through the first 3 weeks, which are the weeks when the subtlety of the early evidence can be either received with the right frame or dismissed with the wrong one. Comment ready if you are at the window right now. If the decision is available and the step is what comes next, comment ready, and then go to the description and click the link and begin. Because the face that is about to show up is the face that the title of this conversation was announcing when it said, "A surprise is waiting for you." You were the subject of the surprise, and the wait is over. I want to say who you are in the language of what this conversation has been describing, not the generic version. The version that belongs to the specific person who has stayed through this specific conversation to this specific point. You are not the person who carries the awareness of the fuller face without ever taking the step toward the provision that allows the fuller face to show up. You have been that person in the waiting season. You have carried the awareness with faithfulness and sincerity, and a sustained hope that the provision was coming, and the waiting season formed you for exactly this moment. But the waiting season has ended, and the person at the end of the waiting season is not the same person as the person in the middle of it. You are not the person who listened to this entire conversation and felt the full resonance of every section and received the description of the gap and the provision and the guarantee and the community and the trajectory and then navigated away from the description without clicking the link. You are not that person. That person exists. That person watches this same conversation and has the same recognition and carries the same waiting season and is equally formed by it. But that person is not you. I am saying that from the position of the one who designed you and who can see what is being established about you in this specific moment, in this specific season, you are the person who takes the step, not because the step is easy, not because the fear is gone, not because the protection has been fully satisfied, but because the specific structure of this specific provision, the mechanism, the evidence, the community of 18,000, the full guarantee, is sufficient reason to move. You are the person who recognizes sufficient reason and moves on it even while the protection is still present and the fear is still real, and the history of the previous reaching without receiving is still a memory that the body carries. I want to give more space to the description of what the person who takes the step carries with them into the weeks and months after the step, not just the external changes that the practice produces, the internal shift in the relationship with the self that the confirmation of the design produces. The most significant thing that happens when the experience begins to confirm what has been described is not the improvement in the external metrics of the daily life, though those are real and they are significant. The most significant thing is the shift in the internal relationship with the question of whether what has been sensed about the capacity and the design and the fuller face is accurate. Most people in the waiting season carry a specific internal ambivalence about that question. On one side of the ambivalence is the sense, the sustained and real and often confirmed sense that more is available, that the design is real, that the face that the restoration reveals is the accurate face. On the other side is the specific doubt that the length of the waiting season produces, the doubt that says if the design were real and the capacity were real and the fuller face were the accurate face, the waiting season would not have been as long as it has been. The experience of the restoration resolves that ambivalence, not by suppressing the doubt, by providing the specific experiential evidence that the sense was right, the design is real, the capacity is real, the fuller face is the accurate face, and the fact that the experience confirms this, the fact that the 8 minutes and the $39 produce the beginning of exactly what the design was always pointing toward, changes the relationship with the self in a way that is more fundamental than any single improvement in any single dimension of the daily life. I want to speak to the person who has been wondering whether the sense of more that has been the background of the waiting season is accurate or inflated, whether the awareness of the fuller face is a real perception of a real design or a wishful projection that the daily life has been disconfirming. The experience of the restoration is the answer to that question, and the answer is the one that I have been saying in this conversation, and that the over 18,000 people who have taken the step before you have confirmed in their own experience. The sense of more is accurate. The awareness of the fuller face is a real perception of a real design. The fuller face is the face that the restoration reveals, and the revelation begins with the step that is available right now. I want to speak to the specific internal quality of the moment just before the step is taken, the moment when the decision has been made internally, but the external action has not yet been completed. The click has not yet been clicked. The link has not yet been followed. The transaction has not yet been made, but the deciding is done. That moment, the moment between the deciding and the acting, is one of the most important moments in the specific story of the specific person who has been in the specific waiting season that this conversation has been addressing. Because that moment is the moment when the person who has been in the waiting season moves from the inside of it to the edge of it, from the position of the one who has been carrying the hope of the fuller face to the position of the one who is about to begin receiving it, from the identity of the waiter to the identity of the receiver, and the movement from one to the other happens in the specific action of clicking the link. The external action is the completion of the internal decision. and both together are the step that ends the waiting season. I want to speak the complete offer one final time. The offer is the 8-minute daily auditory sequence called the sequence that Dr. Barone built using neural sync technology to restore cross-hemisphere brain coordination. 4 bonuses included: a guided visualization optimized for the whole brain state, a nutrition guide that reduces neural inflammation and grocery spending, a century-old text recommended for the integrated mind, a 1-page daily habits reference, all of it for one payment of $39, lifetime access, full unconditional money-back guarantee, 0 financial risk. This is what is waiting for you. This is the surprise. This is the specific provision that the title of this conversation was announcing when it said a surprise is waiting for you. The wait was this conversation. The conversation is almost complete. The step is what comes next. And the step is one click on the link in the description below. I want to give you one final image of what the step looks like from the position of the one who is watching you take it. From my position, the step is not a transaction. It is the declaration of a person who has been in a waiting season and who is choosing to receive what was arranged for them at the end of it. It is the act of the will that says the waiting is over and the provision is current, and the face that has been waiting to show up is what comes next. From my position, the step is the answer to the waiting, and the answer to the waiting is always worth celebrating. So I want to say to you, from the position of the one who designed you and who arranged this provision for this season, and who has been watching you carry the waiting with the quality of faithfulness that deserves the provision at the end of it, that the step is the right step, that the surprise is real, that the face that is about to show up is the face I always intended, and that the moment you click the link is the moment the waiting season officially ends and the next season officially begins. Comment done when you have clicked. Comment ready if you are going right now, and know that both of those comments are the response of the person you are, the person who takes the step. Go. I want to come back to the 18,000 people one more time, not as a number, as a community. Because the community is the specific thing that distinguishes the person who takes the step in this conversation from the person who would be taking a first step into an untested territory. The territory has been tested by over 18,000 people in the ordinary conditions of ordinary adult life, in the specific dimensions of daily experience that this conversation has been describing, and they have come back from the territory to report what it contains. What the 18,000 have in common is not the specific dimension in which the shift was first noticed. The shifts were noticed first in different dimensions for different people, some in the mornings, some in the creative work, some in the relationships, some in the spiritual life, some in the professional function. The diversity of where the shift arrived first is itself evidence that the restoration is not a narrow improvement in one specific area. It is a baseline shift that expresses itself differently across different lives, depending on the specific combination of demands and gifts and history and design that characterizes each person in their specific daily conditions. What the 18,000 have in common is the shift itself, the description of a baseline that has risen, a floor that is elevated, a starting point for the day that is different in the specific direction that the research predicts and that the practice delivers. And the convergence of 18,000 different people in the same description of the same direction of the same shift is the specific kind of evidence that transforms a claim about a mechanism into a reliable prediction about an experience. I want to speak to the specific question that the person who has heard all of this may be holding. The question that the protection asks after all the evidence has been assessed and all the mechanisms have been described and all the testimonials have been heard. The question is simply this: will it work for me? Not in general, for me specifically. For the specific combination of history and damage and doubt and desire and design, that is, the specific person watching this conversation. And the answer that I want to give to that question is not the guarantee, though the guarantee is the structural response to it. The answer I want to give is this: the neural architecture that the practice addresses is not a unique architecture that only some people have. It is the standard architecture. The cross-hemisphere coordination that the practice restores is the standard designed function of the standard human brain. The interhemispheric fragmentation that the modern world produces is the standard response of the standard human brain to the specific conditions of the modern world. And the response of the standard human brain to the specific auditory input of the practice is the standard restoration of the standard coordination. Which means, The question of whether it will work for you is the question of whether your brain has the standard architecture that the practice is designed for, and the answer to that question is yes. Your brain is a standard human brain that was designed to coordinate at the whole brain level and that has been experiencing the standard fragmentation that the modern world produces and that is capable of the standard restoration that the practice initiates. You are not the exception. You are the person the practice was built for. I want to stay with the question of whether it will work for you specifically, because I think the honest exploration of that question produces something more useful than the general answer I just gave. The general answer is true. Your brain has the standard architecture. The practice is designed for the standard architecture. The restoration is the standard response to the specific input. All of that is accurate. But the specific version of the question, the version that carries the actual weight of the protection that has been formed by the specific history of the specific person watching this conversation, is not the general question about the standard architecture. It is the specific question about whether the practice will produce the specific shift in the specific area where the gap has been most acutely felt, whether the creative access that has been intermittent will become more reliable for you specifically, whether the quality of the relational presence that you specifically have been trying to bring to the people who matter most to you will actually improve, whether the quality of the spiritual contact that has been partially muffled for you specifically will actually deepen, whether the purpose, clarity that you specifically have been reaching toward will actually begin to arrive. And to the specific version of the question, the answer is the same as the answer to the general version, but with the evidence of the specific community members whose specific areas of shift match your specific areas of gap. Lisa confirms the creative access. Matthew confirms the professional integration. Ellie confirms the relational and empathetic presence. The pastor confirms the quality of spontaneous spiritual contact. The entrepreneur confirms the integrated quality of decision-making. The teacher confirms the quality of presence available to the people closest to them. The shift in whatever specific area is the most acute gap for you is the shift that the 18,000 include among their confirmed experiences. I want to speak now about what the community of people who have taken the step produces for the person who joins it, not only the evidence of the reports, the specific experience of not being alone in the restoration. Because the waiting season by its nature tends to be a solitary experience, the awareness of the fuller face that the waiting season produces is not usually something that the ordinary social environment provides space to articulate or share. It is carried internally, quietly, in the awareness that more is available and that the available is less than the designed, and the joining of a community of over 18,000 people who share the same awareness and who have moved from the carrying to the receiving is itself a specific kind of provision. The community provides the confirmation that the internal awareness was accurate, that the awareness of the fuller face was not an isolated or exceptional experience, but the common experience of a specific kind of person in the specific condition that this conversation has been describing, and the confirmation of the community, the recognition of oneself in the accounts of the others who have been through the same waiting season and who have received the same provision, is the specific social and relational dimension of the restoration that the practice itself does not provide. The community provides it. The $39 is the cost of finding out whether the standard restoration produces the specific quality of shift in the specific conditions of your specific daily life that the 18,000 others have reported in the specific conditions of their specific daily lives. And the answer that comes back from those conditions, for a person who has the standard architecture and gives the practice the accumulation time it requires, is the confirmation that what was described is what is delivered. The guarantee means that if your conditions are not the standard conditions, if for some specific reason your specific experience does not confirm what the research and the community and the conversation have described, the cost of finding out is zero. You ask, every dollar returns, and you have the answer to the question. And if the experience does confirm it, as it has confirmed it for 18,000 people before you, then the $39 is the beginning of the restoration that the waiting season was always moving toward. The link is in the description. The community is waiting. The surprise is real. Comment yes below, and then go. I want to spend some time in this section with a specific question that the title of this conversation raises and that I have been building toward answering throughout. The title says, "This is about your face." And the question that the title raises is, why the face? Why not the mind? Why not the heart? Why not the spirit or the calling or the potential? Why the face? The face is the most intimate external thing. It is the boundary between the inside and the outside, between what is private and what is shared, between what is felt and what is expressed. The face is where the interior life meets the exterior world. And the condition of the face, the quality of what it can express and what it can receive, and how fully the inside arrives at the outside through it, is the condition of the life in all of its dimensions simultaneously. The face I have been describing, the designed face, the face of the whole brain state, is the face that the interior life was designed to arrive through most fully. The face that expresses the quality of the integrated mind rather than the filtered quality of the fragmented one. The face that allows the thinking to arrive in the world with the fullness of what the thinking actually contains, rather than what the fragmented processing delivered. The face that allows the care for the people the person loves to arrive at its actual depth, rather than at the depth the reduced relational presence capacity could deliver. The face is the expression of the integration, and when the integration is restored, the face is restored, not as a metaphor, as the actual quality of what shows up in the room when the person enters it, what the voice carries when the person speaks, what the attention gives when the person listens, what the creative work contains when the person makes something, what the prayer holds when the person reaches toward the one they are addressing. The face is all of those things, and the restoration of the face is the restoration of all of those expressions simultaneously. I want to speak to the specific relationship between the restoration of the face and the specific calling that the waiting season has been carrying toward, because the calling is always the specific thing that the waiting season is about, not the generic improvement in cognitive performance. The specific thing that the person was designed to do and to be and to give to the world. The specific contribution that only the specific face, fully restored and fully expressed, can make. Most people in the waiting season carry the sense of the calling more clearly than they carry the capacity to fully express it. The calling is present as an awareness, as a sustained sense of direction, as the specific quality of desire that orients the life towards something more specific than the ordinary demands of the ordinary day. And the gap between the calling and the capacity to express it fully is one of the most specific sources of the tension of the waiting season. The person who knows what they were made for and who has not yet had full access to the capacity through which the making for is expressed lives in the specific tension of the calling and the gap simultaneously. The restoration of the face is the restoration of the capacity through which the calling is expressed, not the calling itself. The calling is already present. The restoration is what allows the capacity to match the calling, to give the calling the quality of integrated thinking and creative access and relational presence and spiritual clarity and energetic expression that the calling requires in order to fully arrive in the world as the contribution it was designed to be. I want to say something about the specific relationship between the restoration and the concept of purpose that the waiting season tends to make more acute, because the waiting season, precisely because it is the season of the carrying without the full expressing, produces a heightened awareness of the gap between the person and the purpose. The purpose feels clear enough to be frustrating, close enough to be motivating, far enough away that the distance is the daily experience of the waiting, and the restoration changes the distance, not by changing the purpose, by changing the baseline from which the person moves toward it. The restored baseline moves the person closer to the purpose in the practical sense of making more of the design capacity available for the pursuit of the specific contribution that the purpose is pointing toward. The waiting season ends not because the purpose changes, but because the capacity to pursue it is restored to the level the purpose requires. And the face that shows up at the end of the waiting season is the face that the purpose has always been calling toward, the face that has the capacity for the specific contribution. The face that the people who need what the calling produces can receive it from. The face that the world that needs what the specific design was placed in you to give has been waiting to encounter. The restored face is the face that begins to fulfill what the waiting season was always forming toward. And the restoration begins with the step. The step is available today. I want to describe what happens in the world around the face when the face shows up restored, not as grandiosity, as the specific, practical, observable description of what happens in the ordinary relationships of the ordinary life of an ordinary person who is operating from the whole brain baseline rather than the fragmented one. The conversations that happen with the restored face are different. not because the person has more information or better words or a more compelling argument, because the quality of presence in the conversation is different. The listener on the other side of the conversation is receiving the thinking and the care and the attention of a person whose integrated mind is fully engaged in the exchange. And the integrated mind, when it is engaged in a conversation, produces a quality of attention and responsiveness and connection that the fragmented mind cannot fully replicate even with great effort. The person on the other side of the conversation with the restored face feels the quality of being heard at a level that is different from the ordinary quality of feeling heard, and that quality changes the conversation. The decisions that are made from the restored face are different, not more confident in the sense of less careful, more integrated in the specific sense that both the analytical capacity and the intuitive capacity are simultaneously available to the decision in the moment when the decision needs to be made. The best decisions that most people make, the decisions they look back on and recognize as having been right in a way that the analytical case alone would not have justified, are made from the integrated state. The restoration makes that state the ordinary starting point rather than the occasional peak. The work that is done from the restored face is different, not only in the product but in the process. The quality of the engagement with the work itself, the specific texture of the hours spent on the things that matter most, is different when the face that is doing the work is the face of the whole brain state rather than the face of the fragmented one. The work feels different from the inside, and the work that feels different from the inside produces a different quality of work on the outside, not perfection. The specific quality of work that a person produces when the full designed resource for the work is available rather than the partial designed resource. And the life that is lived from the restored face is the specific life that the waiting season was always waiting for. The life where the gap between what was designed and what is expressed has been closed not by trying harder but by restoring the baseline from which the expression comes. The face that shows up in that life is the face that this conversation has been about from the very beginning, when the title announced that what was coming was a message about your face. The message is complete. The face is about to show up. The link is in the description. I am approaching the end of what I have to say in this conversation, and I want to use what is left to say the things that belong at the end rather than the things that belong in the middle. The first thing that belongs at the end is the complete and plain statement of what is available through the link in the description below this video and what it will cost to access it. Not because the statement has not been made before, because the end of a conversation is the place where what matters most should be stated with maximum clarity and minimum decoration. The link below this video gives access to an 8-minute daily auditory sequence designed by Dr. Daniel Barone, a neurologist from New York, using neural sync technology to restore the cross-hemisphere brain coordination that the research identifies as the neural signature of whole brain function and that the modern world gradually reduces in the ordinary course of ordinary adult life. The sequence is delivered through headphones. 8 minutes, eyes closed. That is the complete practice. With the sequence come 4 bonuses: a guided visualization optimized for the whole brain state, a nutrition guide that addresses the foods that work against the restoration and reduces monthly grocery costs by over $100 while doing so, a classic text over 100 years old that Dr. Barone recommends for the integrated mind, a 1-page daily habits reference that summarizes the 5 habits most associated with the full expression of the transformation. All of it is included. 1 payment, lifetime access. The price of the 1 payment is $39. Not the $500 initial professional valuation, not the $49 first public price. $39 today through the link in the description for the complete package. And every dollar of the $39 is protected by a full, unconditional, 100% money-back guarantee that has no conditions beyond asking for the return. That is the complete offer, the plain statement. Everything available, the specific mechanism, the specific cost, the specific protection, the specific access. Everything described as simply as it can be described. The link is in the description below this video. The description is visible below the video wherever you are watching this. The access is 1 click away. I want to speak to the specific quality of the week that begins the day after the step is taken, not the 90-day picture. The first 7 days. Because the first 7 days are the days that most people use to form their primary judgment about whether the practice is delivering and I want to give you the frame for receiving those days before you encounter them. The first day carries the quality of having moved, of having done the thing that the conversation was pointing toward and that the protection was standing in front of. The 8 minutes of the first practice are not the most important 8 minutes of the journey. They are the first 8 minutes. And the quality of what follows the first 8 minutes is the quality of a person who has moved from the position of the one who is deciding to the position of the one who has decided and acted. That internal shift, the shift from the considering to the doing, is itself a neural event. The brain registers the act of moving toward what has been calling. And the specific quality of the internal state in the hours after the first practice is partly the direct effect of the neural sync signal and partly the effect of having finally moved. The second day is the day of the first real evidence, not the dramatic shift, the first notice. The morning of the second day, the morning that comes after the first practice, has a quality that is slightly different from the morning before the first practice. Not because the first 8 minutes transformed the neural architecture, because the first 8 minutes initiated the process that begins to transform it, and the initiation of the process is itself a change in the direction of the drift. The first evidence of the changed direction is the slightly different quality of the second morning. By the third and fourth day, the noticing is more confident. The person can name what they are noticing with more precision than the second day allowed. The mental friction of the morning is slightly less. The quality of the first 2 hours of the day is slightly better. The transition from the quiet of the practice to the demand of the day is slightly more fluid. These are not dramatic claims. They are the specific description of what the early accumulation of the restoration feels like in the specific texture of the daily experience. By the 7th day, the end of the first week, the person has something they did not have before, a track record, 7 days of the new direction, 7 mornings with the 8 minutes behind them, 7 accumulations of the specific signal that is building toward the restored baseline, and the quality of the 7th day, compared to the quality of the day before the first practice, is measurably different in a way that the person can name, and that motivates the continuation of the practice into the second week and the third, and through the accumulation that produces the unmistakable. That is the first week, 7 days, 8 minutes each, the beginning of what this entire conversation has been describing. And the beginning begins with the link in the description below this video. Today, the step is what comes next. The first week is what follows the step, and the restored face is what follows the first week and the weeks after it until the accumulation has done what the accumulation was always designed to do. I want to say the second thing that belongs at the end, the thing that the title of this conversation has been pointing towards since the first word. Wait a little longer. A surprise is waiting for you. This is about your face. The wait is over. The little longer I asked for was the length of this conversation. The conversation is ending. The surprise that has been waiting is the specific provision I have described in detail. The 8-minute practice that begins the restoration of the designed face, available now through the link below, at $39 with the full guarantee. The surprise is about your face because the surprise is the provision for the gap between the face that has been showing up and the face that the design was always reaching toward. And the "this is about your face" announcement in the title was not a dramatic claim. It was the specific statement of what this entire conversation has been about from the first word to this one. The face. The expression of the design in the world, the boundary between the inside and the outside. The place where everything I designed for you to give arrives in the reality of the daily lived experience. The face that is about to change. I want to say one more thing. The people who need what the face that is about to show up can give them have been waiting for that face in the same way that you have been waiting for the provision that allows it to show up. The child who needs the more present parent, the student who needs the more integrated teacher, the community that needs the more fully alive leader, the partner who needs the more available presence. They have been receiving what the reduced baseline could give, and they are about to receive what the restored baseline gives instead. The step changes things for all of them, and it begins with the link. I want to give you the closing of this conversation with the full weight of everything that has been built toward it, not a summary, the ending. The specific words that belong to the end of a conversation that was always about the face, about the designed face, about the gap between the face that has been showing up and the face that was always meant to show up, about the provision that closes the gap, and about the specific person who has been in the specific waiting season that the closing of the gap has been preparing. You came into this conversation in a waiting season, I know that because the waiting season was what made the conversation available to you. The pattern of a person in a waiting season, the sustained attention to the things this conversation has been about, is the pattern that the algorithm that placed this video in your path recognized and responded to. The waiting produced the seeking produced the encounter, and the encounter has been this conversation from the first word to this one. You are leaving this conversation at a different point in the season than the point at which you entered it. The conversation has done what the announcement in the title said it was going to do. It has described the surprise. It has named the gap and the provision and the mechanism and the evidence and the community and the cost and the guarantee. It has described the face and what stands between the face that has been showing up and the face that the design was always pointing toward. It has given you everything that the announcement required, and the announcement has now been made complete. The surprise is available right now through the link in the description below this video for $39 with the full guarantee, in the exact form that the design of the provision requires. 8 minutes a day, headphones, eyes closed. The specific neural signal that the designed architecture responds to with the specific restoration of the specific coordination that produces the designed face. The surprise is real. The provision is current, and the ending of the waiting season is the step that the link below initiates. I want to give more of the closing to the specific content that belongs to a final section, the content of what the restored face means to the world that is waiting to receive it. Because I have been speaking throughout this conversation to the person who is waiting for the provision, and I want to close by speaking to a different kind of waiting. The waiting of the world around the person for the face that is about to show up. The people in your daily life, the people in your family and your community and your professional world and your spiritual community and the circles of relationship and influence that your specific life touches have been receiving the face that the fragmented baseline produced. Not a bad face, not an unloving face, not a face that has been absent or indifferent or careless, a face that has been giving everything the reduced baseline could give with full sincerity and full commitment, but the reduced face, not the designed face. And they have been waiting, not consciously, not with the specific awareness that what they are receiving is the reduced version of what the design was always reaching toward, but in the specific way that people respond to the partial version of a presence by continuing to reach toward the fuller version that the partial version suggests is available. The child who keeps coming to the parent one more time, even after the parent has given what the available baseline could give, is reaching toward the fuller version. The partner who keeps asking for a quality of presence that the available baseline has not yet fully delivered is reaching toward the fuller version. The colleague who keeps bringing the most important work to the person even when the earlier collaborations have delivered good but not quite great is reaching toward the fuller version. The world around you has been waiting for the designed face, not with frustration, with the specific hope that what has been available will eventually be the fully available. And the restoration is the answer to their waiting as much as it is the answer to yours. I want to say something specific about what changes in the world around the restored face, not the dramatic, the ordinary. The ordinary conversations begin to be qualitatively different, not because the person says different things, because the quality of what the person brings to the conversation is different, the quality of the listening, the quality of the thinking that responds to what was heard, the quality of the care that shows up in the response. The ordinary conversations become the place where the designed face expresses what it was designed to express, and the people in those ordinary conversations receive something they have been waiting for. This is the specific surprise that the title was announcing, not only the surprise for you, the surprise for the world that has been waiting for the face that is about to show up, the face that you were designed to bring, the face that the provision restores. The face that begins to show up the morning after the first practice and that becomes more fully present with each accumulated day of the 8 minutes. The face that this entire conversation has been about from the first word to this one. I want to speak one final time over the face that has been receiving this conversation. Not the face in the mirror, the face I have been addressing from the very first word, the designed face. The face that was given to you and that has been present in you throughout the waiting season, not at the level it was designed to express at, but present, carried, faithful, still reaching toward the level the design calls for through every day of the waiting season that has brought you to this specific moment. I see that face. I have been addressing it in this conversation with the specific precision of the one who designed it and who knows what it was designed to carry and what it was always reaching toward. And I want to say to the face I am addressing, from the fullness of what I have for it in this specific season at this specific moment with this specific provision in front of it, that the wait was not wasted. The wait was not the indication of an inadequacy or an unworthiness or a delay in the provision. The wait was the formation, and the formation is complete. Go to the description, click the link, give the 8 minutes tomorrow morning and the morning after and through the first week and into the second week where the evidence becomes more named, and through the third week where the confidence builds, and into the first month where the shift becomes unmistakable, and into the second month where the shift becomes ordinary. And let the accumulation of the restoration produce in the specific conditions of your specific daily life the specific expression of the specific designed face that this conversation has been announcing from the beginning. Come back and comment. Tell me what the first practice gave you. Tell me what the first week produced. Tell me what the face looks like when it shows up at the level the design always intended. The comment section of this video is the record of the people who received the surprise. Add your comment to the record, and know that from the position of the one who designed you and who arranged this provision for this season, and who has been watching the waiting season with full knowledge of what was coming at the end of it, the ending is good. The provision is real. The face is about to show up. I declare over your face right now that the season beginning today is the season of the expression, not the season of the reaching toward the expression, the season of it. The season in which the face that the design was always pointing toward begins to show up as the ordinary face, as the face that the morning starts with, as the face that the relationships receive, as the face that the work comes from, as the face that the spiritual life is expressed through, as the face that the people who come after you receive as the model of what the ordinary looks like when the design is operating at the level it was always designed to operate at. The provision is in the description. The link is one click away. The waiting season is ending. The surprise has been delivered. And the face, the specific irreplaceable designed face that this entire conversation has been about, is about to show up. I love you. I see you. And I have been speaking over the face that was always meant to be seen. Go, receive what has been arranged for it.